The deep space monitoring station floated silently on the edge of human territory, far from any busy trade route or crowded planet. Most of the time, it was one of the quietest places in the galaxy. The officers here often joked that even time seemed to move slower in this lonely corner of space. But that calm was exactly why the station existed. Away from noise and interference, it could hear things that no other system could hear, signals too faint, too strange, or too distant for normal sensors to catch. On an ordinary day, the station received nothing more interesting than background radiation, the hum of distant stars, and the occasional stray broadcast from a nearby colony. But today, a single alert tone echoed through the main lab. At first, no one reacted. Alerts happened sometimes, usually false positives or random cosmic noise, but then the tone repeated, louder, sharper, demanding attention. A young technician named Mara looked up from her console, confused. She tapped her earpiece and frowned. "Commander, I think you should see this." Commander Rylanhart, who was half asleep over a mug of bitter station coffee, sighed and walked over. He expected another malfunction, but when he saw the readings on Mara's screen, his eyes widened. All traces of sleep gone instantly. The signal on the display was messy, broken, and filled with cracks of interference. But beneath all that noise, there was structure. Someone somewhere was speaking. "Where is it coming from?" Hart asked softly. Mara checked the coordinates twice, then a third time. The result didn't change. "From the Voss Enclave region, the uninhabited zone." Hart stared at her. "That area is supposed to be empty." "Exactly," she whispered, "but the signal is real. I think it's an SOS." Within minutes, the monitoring station transformed from a sleepy outpost into a storm of activity. Technicians rushed between consoles, pulling data, analyzing code, and running emergency protocols. The lights dimmed and pulsed red as the system locked onto the broadcast. More details appeared, more fragments of the message decoded. The words were not human. The frequency pattern was not human. The distress call carried emotional weight, almost like a cry from a living being. Filled with raw fear and urgency, the room fell silent as the full translation unfolded onto the main screen. Casualties rising, cities falling, atmosphere failing, food reserves gone, hostile force approaching. We beg for aid. We cannot survive. Please, anyone. Several officers exchanged unsettled looks. The message was short, but the pain behind it was clear. Whoever sent this was desperate. Their world was collapsing, and they had no one else to call. A communications specialist leaned forward. "Commander, this language isn't listed in any known database. This species, whoever they are, we've never met them." Hart folded his arms slowly. "Which means they weren't expecting humans to hear them. Or that we were their last hope," Mara added. A new data stream appeared: timestamps, environment metrics, and casualty estimates. It was even worse than expected. The numbers were rising every hour. The planet's ecosystem was dying. Massive storms raged across continents. Firestorms swept through forests. Entire cities were sinking into unstable ground. And on top of all that, an unknown fleet was heading toward the planet, likely invaders or scavengers, hoping to take advantage of the chaos. The technicians zoomed out the display, revealing the planet's location. Hart stared at it for a long moment. The world was in a region that even humans avoided. Dangerous radiation pockets, unstable star activity, and unpredictable asteroid storms made it nearly impossible for most species to survive there. Who could live in a place like that? Someone asked. "Someone tougher than they look," Mara replied quietly. The translation software kept working, finally revealing the name the aliens used for themselves. According to the few fragments of cultural data hidden in the message, they were gentle, herbivorous creatures with fragile bodies and peaceful societies. They were not built for war. They were not built to withstand ecological collapse. And they certainly were not built to survive against a hostile fleet. No wonder their message sounded like pure terror. The next wave of decoded information displayed shaking footage taken from a collapsing tower. At first, the image was too distorted to understand, but then it cleared just enough for everyone to see. The Siraki were small, soft-bodied beings with large, frightened eyes. They trembled as they huddled together in a shelter while firestorms raged outside. Buildings crumbled in the background. A mother held her child close, shielding them from falling debris. The signal ended with the camera shaking violently before cutting out completely. The room stayed silent for a long time after that. Hart exhaled slowly, the weight of responsibility settling over his shoulders. They had no idea how old the message was. The space signals often traveled for weeks or months, but some part of him refused to believe it was too late. He couldn't accept that these beings had cried out into the void and died unheard. "Run a full spectral analysis," he ordered. "Find out how much the signal degraded during travel. I need an estimate on when this was sent." The team worked quickly. After several tense minutes, the result appeared. The message was sent only 4 days ago. That changed everything. If the humans responded now, there was still a chance. Hart turned to Mara. "Notify Earth Command. Full priority channel. Use emergency encryption." "Yes, sir." As she opened the channel, Hart looked again at the tiny faces on the video frame. Peaceful aliens, gentle, afraid, asking for help from a universe that rarely offered kindness. His jaw tightened. Who else picked up this signal? He asked. One of the senior officers responded. The Federation probably heard it first, but they won't intervene. This is outside their safe territory. And they don't send fleets to dangerous regions. And the other species, hard-pressed, they avoid this area entirely. The Siraki are on their own. Not anymore, Hart thought. The message to Earth Command connected. Hart delivered the report with steady precision, but his voice carried urgency. When he finished, there was a long silence on the other end. Then a single reply came through. We hear you. Stand by. Hart paced the room, waiting. The technicians pretended to stay focused on their work, but tension hung heavily in the air. They all wanted the same answer. They all hoped humanity would do what everyone else feared to do. The next transmission came from an admiral, whose voice was calm but firm. The message is authentic. The planetary situation is confirmed. The hostile force is real. Prepare your station. We are mobilizing a fleet. The room erupted with activity. Officers cheered. Even the stoic Commander Hart allowed himself a relieved smile. Humanity had made its decision. They would respond. But the admiral wasn't finished. This will be the largest emergency fleet we've ever assembled. Warships, aid vessels, medical carriers, terraforming units, everything. The Siraki civilization may depend entirely on our arrival. Hart felt a chill run down his spine. He had expected assistance, but not something this massive. This wasn't just help. This was something else entirely. A message to the galaxy. Humanity was coming. Another officer turned to the commander. Sir, why are we sending so much? This is more than we've launched for some of our own colonies. Hart spoke softly, but everyone heard him, because no one else will. Because they asked for help, and because we know what it feels like to call into the dark and hope someone listens. As preparations continued, the station received one last fragment of the Siraki message. It was faint, nearly erased by cosmic radiation, but it played clearly enough. We do not want to die. Please, if anyone hears us, we are still here. Hart closed his eyes briefly. That simple line struck something deep inside him. Humans were known across the galaxy as Deathworlders, survivors born on a harsh, dangerous planet. Many species feared them, some avoided them, but none of that mattered now. All that mattered was that someone had cried for help, and humans, stubborn, relentless humans, had heard them. The monitoring station sent the final confirmation to Earth Command. The fleet was underway. Engines roared, ships aligned into formation, and stargates glowed brighter than ever as vessels prepared for long-distance jumps. For the first time in generations, humanity mobilized not for conquest, not for territory, not for defense, but purely to save lives, even lives they had never seen before. Even a species who might never have known. Humans existed. The crew of the station gathered at the viewing window, watching as the first wave of ships streaked across the starfield like lines of silver fire. Destroyers, battle cruisers, rescue shuttles, medical frigates, an entire wave of hope and fury heading into the unknown. Mara whispered quietly, awed by the sight. Do you think we'll make it in time? Hart didn't look away from the stars. We'll make it, he said. We have to. Behind them, the final translation screen still displayed the broken words of the Siraki asterisk. Someone had reached out into the darkness, and humanity, true to its strange, fierce nature, was answering with everything it had. The galaxy would remember this moment. The moment a fragile, dying voice whispered for help, and the Deathworlders answered with a massive fleet. Humanity had always been known as a strange force in the galaxy. Many species respected them, many feared them, and almost everyone agreed on one thing. Humans were unpredictable. They grew up on a dangerous planet filled with storms, predators, diseases, and endless struggles. Because of this, other species gave them a nickname. It meant beings who survived harsh worlds, beings who could handle what others could not. When the Siraki SOS reached Earth Command, the reaction was immediate and powerful. The message was still repeating in the background of the main hall, crackling with fear and pain. The images of destroyed cities and crying families haunted every officer in the room. The details of the dying atmosphere and the invading fleet turned the air heavy with urgency. The senior leaders gathered inside the great strategy chamber, a circular room with a massive holographic display at its center. Generals, admirals, scientists, diplomats, and fleet coordinators hurried in from every direction. Some carried tablets filled with data. Others looked like they had run all the way from their offices. No one needed to be convinced that action was necessary. Admiral Leora Kane stepped forward. She was known for her calm voice and sharp decisions. She stood straight, her eyes fixed on the hologram showing the Siraki planet, half covered in storms and glowing cracks. You all know why we're here, she said. A new species has called for help. An entire civilization is dying. A soft murmur spread across the room. Some officers were already thinking about logistics, routes, and fleet sizes. Others were thinking about dangers and known enemies, unstable regions, and the risk of losing ships. One general raised his hand. Admiral, the region is unstable and extremely dangerous. We should consider sending a small scout team first. A larger fleet might know. Her response cut through his words, firm but controlled. The message shows millions already in danger. If the hostile fleet arrives before we do, a scout team will die without helping anyone. We go big, we go fast, and we go prepared. Her words echoed in the chamber, filling many with courage. A young diplomat, barely out of academy training, hesitated before speaking. Do we even know these aliens? That's right. What if they fear us? We don't help because they trust us, Kane replied. We help because they need us. One by one, the leaders nodded. The decision was made. Emergency protocols activated. Red lights pulsed along the ceiling, and a deep vibration spread through the floor as massive space docks powered on. Earth Command sent priority orders to every major fleet and colony. It did not matter if they were in the middle of training exercises, border patrols, scientific missions, or rest cycles. Every available ship was summoned. Within hours, orbit around Earth transformed into a storm of activity. Gigantic hangar doors opened across the lunar bases. Mars released entire squadrons of long-range carriers. Shipyards in Jupiter's orbit activated cranes and clamps, as engineers sprinted to finish last-minute repairs on vessels that had been sitting unused for months. Even small colonies far from Earth began redirecting their ships toward the assembly point. The galaxy had never seen humans move this fast. Down on Earth, civilian news channels broke their regular programming. Everyone, farmers, teachers, students, factory workers, heard the same message. An unknown species has sent a distress call. Earth is responding. Many citizens paused in silence. Some felt fear. Many felt pride. For centuries, humanity had fought wars, ended wars, and survived disasters. But saving an entire alien species, that was something different. That was something bigger. In the command hall, Admiral Kane stood beside a long glass window overlooking the shipyards. Teams of engineers moved like ants across enormous hulls. Sparks flew from welding torches. Engines glowed bright white as they warmed up for long-distance travel. A second-in-command, Captain Idris Cole, approached her with a tablet. Admiral, you should know our fleet is at 70% operational and climbing. We can deploy in less than 12 hours. Kane raised an eyebrow. That fast? Humans don't hesitate, Idris said with a small smile. The Admiral couldn't help returning the smile. Good. Across military channels, the same message spread. All personnel prepare for the largest humanitarian and defense mission in recorded history. Huge screens displayed the list of ships being deployed. War-class destroyers, heavy battlecruisers, shield carriers, medical frigates, planetary rescue, platforms, supply ships, terraforming assistance vessels, atmospheric stabilizers, food and water carriers, search and rescue shuttles, evacuation barges, science ships. It wasn't just a fleet. It was a whole mobile city designed to save a world. But some people still worried. On a distant base orbiting Saturn, a senior weapons engineer named Dr. Renton frowned as he watched the preparations. We don't know anything about these aliens. We don't even know who the invaders are. This could be a trap. His assistant shook his head. If it was a trap, they wouldn't send footage of their children crying. Renton paused. He had seen the footage too. It had stayed in his mind longer than he wanted to admit. Back on Earth, students at the International Peace Academy gathered around a big outdoor screen. A girl with dark hair whispered to her friend, "Why are we going so far to help strangers?" Her friend answered softly, "Because once, we were alone too, and no one came for us." Humanity had a long memory. Old wars, old disasters, old loneliness. They remembered what it felt like to be desperate. That memory shaped their choice now. The assembly point for the fleet was a massive open region in space known as Formation Gate 7. It was a calm zone, where ships could gather safely before launching through long-distance jump routes. The first vessels arrived quickly, their engines glowing in the dark like floating stars. Destroyers lined up in tight formations. Carriers opened their hangar bays as fighter squadrons zipped in and out. Aid ships arranged themselves in a protective ring around medical cruisers. Pilots, doctors, engineers, and rescue workers boarded their stations with focused determination. Inside one of the medical ships, Dr. Alina Merrow checked her equipment twice. She had treated wounded soldiers before, but this mission was different. These weren't soldiers she would be saving. These were families, children, entire cities. "I hope we're not too late," she whispered. "You know humans," her colleague said. "We're always late, but somehow still in time." She laughed softly, though her heart was heavy. On another ship, a group of soldiers sat in a briefing room. Their commander walked in and looked at each of them. "Our mission is simple. Protect the rescue teams. If the hostile fleet is still there, we hold them off until every Siraki civilian is safe." A young soldier raised his hand. "Sir, why us? Why humans?" The commander answered without hesitation. "Because no one else will go." When the fleets from different planets finished assembling, the final united formation came into view. Thousands of ships, from the smallest fighters to the largest dreadnoughts, stretched across kilometers of space. It was a breathtaking sight, beautiful and terrifying at the same time. Captain Idris stood on the bridge of the flagship, staring at the enormous holographic map. "Admiral, all ships report ready." Kane placed a hand on the control railing. "Send the order." A single message traveled through every communication channel, echoing across the fleet. "Prepare for jump. Mission Saraki Rescue." Inside the flagship, the engines began to pulse with power. The vibrations grew stronger. The ship lights dimmed as energy redirected to the main jump core. The jump gates ahead flickered like ripples in water. "All ships," Kane commanded, her voice strong. "You are part of something historic. We do not know what they called for help, and we will be the ones to answer. Let this fleet be the proof that humanity is not just a force of strength, but a force of compassion." A soft silence followed, full of emotion. "Jump on my mark," she said. 3, 2, 1, jump. The gates exploded with white-blue light. The fleet disappeared into the stars. Far away, in a dying world filled with fear, the Saraki had no idea that an armada of hope and impossible, massive force of Deathworlders was racing toward them with everything humanity had, and nothing in the galaxy would stop them. The human fleet burst out of the jump corridor in a flare of light, and the first thing the crews saw was fire. Not normal fire, this was fire across continents. Huge storms of flame rolled over forests, deserts, and entire cities on the Saraki homeworld. The sky itself looked cracked, filled with glowing dust and smoke that stretched all the way into the upper atmosphere. It was as if the planet was crying out in its last hours. Inside the command bridge of the flagship, Admiral Kane stood still for a moment, stunned by the sight. Even she, a woman who had seen dozens of battlefields, felt her heart tighten. On her right, Captain Idris whispered, "We're too late." Kane shook her head slowly. "No, not yet. Not while life still exists below." But when the long-range scanners activated, the truth became clearer. Saraki villages and cities were collapsing. Water sources were poisoned. Crops were turning to dust. The storms were spreading faster than predicted. Their world was breaking. A soft beep echoed across the bridge in enemy signal. A hostile fleet was approaching from the far edge of the star system, moving toward the planet like wolves smelling a wounded creature. The Admiral's voice hardened. So that part of the message was true. They're coming to finish the job. The human fleet shifted into battle formation. But there was no time to waste. The Saraki were dying now. Rescue missions had to start immediately. Admiral Kane tapped her wrist console. "Deploy drop teams. Prepare atmospheric shields. Send medical squads, engineers, and rescue pilots. Go now. Every second counts." Across the fleet, dozens of hangar doors opened like the petals of a giant metal flower. Dropships, rescue shuttles, armored troop carriers, and supply pods launched from every direction, diving toward the burning world. Engines screamed as they cut through the thick, unstable atmosphere. Inside one of the dropships, Lieutenant Sarah Holt gripped the handles overhead as turbulence shook the cabin violently. She was a rescue officer, trained to enter disaster zones, but she had never seen something like this. The pilot yelled over the roaring wind, "We're entering Saraki airspace. Storm levels are extreme." "Hang on." The ship jolted as lightning cracked across the sky, striking so close the metal shell vibrated. The clouds below swirled like a giant whirlpool of ash and smoke. The Saraki were somewhere down there, hiding, trapped, or running for their lives. Visual on a city. The co-pilot shouted, "Or what's left of one." Through a break in the smoke, Sarah saw shattered landscape ruins, burning towers, broken bridges, and streets split open like wounds. But she also saw movement. "Small figures running. Survivors, bring us down," Sarah ordered. "They need help." Meanwhile, in another dropship descending over a different region, Sergeant Leon Weller and his squad stared at the devastation beneath them. Entire forests were nothing but black earth. Rivers had boiled away. Mountains were collapsing due to internal heat pressure. One of his soldiers whispered, "How did these people ever survive on this world?" Leon answered quietly, "They weren't supposed to. No one should live on a place like this, except humans." That was the strange part. Homeworlds like this, unstable, violent, unpredictable, were normal for humans. Their own planet, Earth, had hurricanes, quakes, volcanoes, deserts, and freezing poles. But the Saraki was soft-bodied, peaceful, and physically fragile. Their homeworld wasn't meant to be deadly. It had become deadly. And now they were suffering for it. As the dropships landed, human soldiers and medics rushed out into the chaos. They activated portable shield generators that created shimmering domes of safety. Inside the domes, the air cooled, the smoke cleared, and oxygen balance systems adjusted the breathing levels to safe amounts for both humans and Saraki. The Saraki, though terrified at first, slowly approached. They were small creatures, barely up to a human waist. They had long ears, soft fur-like skin, and large shimmering eyes full of fear. Their movements were shaky, like they were not used to rough terrain. Children clung to adults, trembling as explosions echoed in the distance. When a Saraki elder saw the humans arrive, he froze, stunned. Humans were tall, strong, armored from head to toe, and marched like a force of nature. to the Siraki who had been told stories of humans being dangerous wild creatures. This sight could have been frightening, but then something happened that changed everything. A human medic knelt down, removed her helmet, and held out a piece of clean water gel. Her face was gentle, and her tone soft. "It's okay," she said quietly. "We're here to help." The Siraki child she was offering it to hesitated, then reached out with shaking hands. The child took the gel, and when they tasted the cool water inside, their eyes widened with relief. The elder stepped forward, voice trembling. "You came for us?" "Yes," the medic said. "We heard your call." More Siraki appeared from behind a collapsed building, limping, bleeding, coughing. Human medical teams moved fast. They tended to injuries, stabilized breathing, and used portable scanners to check for infections. Soldiers cleared debris, created safe paths, and guided families into evacuation zones. Everywhere humans went, the Siraki watched with wide, confused eyes. They had expected monsters. Instead, they saw protectors. At the same time, the hostile marauder fleet was racing closer. Their ships were black, sharp-edged, and built for raiding. They came from a species known for scavenging dying worlds and taking survivors as slaves. The Siraki would have been easy prey, but now, the marauders were about to face humans. Admiral Kane received the sensor alert first. Enemy ships entering attack range. They will reach the Siraki planet's orbit in 7 minutes. Her expression hardened. "Activate defense grid. No one harms these people while humanity stands here." The human warships created a protective ring around the entire planet. Massive cannons powered up. Shield networks came online. Fighter squadrons launched in beautiful formation, ready to intercept anything that approached on the surface. Rescue teams worked twice as fast. Lieutenant Sarah's group found a collapsed school building. Children were trapped under fallen beams and concrete dust. The Siraki adults were screaming, begging for help but too weak to lift the rubble. Sarah and her team rushed forward. Using exosuit strength boosters, they lifted huge blocks of debris like they weighed nothing. One child was found unconscious. A medic quickly provided oxygen support and wrapped the tiny body in a warming blanket. A Siraki parent sobbed with relief, hugging the child tightly. Nearby, Sergeant Leon's squad discovered a shelter where dozens of Siraki had taken refuge, but the air inside was toxic. Without hesitation, Leon removed his own helmet and gave it to a Siraki child. Despite the burning smoke that hit his own lungs, his soldiers shouted, "Sarge, you'll suffocate." "I'll live," Leon said, coughing but smiling. "The kid won't." That small act of bravery spread through the Siraki like wildfire. They began to look at humans in a different way, not as dangerous Deathworlders but as strange, fierce guardians who were willing to suffer so that others could live. Above them, the first shots of the orbital battle flashed across the sky. The marauder fleet reached firing position. Enemy ships opening fire. A sensor officer shouted. Admiral Kane didn't flinch. "Return fire. Hold the line." Human destroyers unleashed their cannons. Fighters swarmed like a storm of metal and fire. The sky above the Siraki world lit up in colors of war. On the ground, the Siraki flinched at every explosion, expecting death. But humans didn't stop working. They didn't panic. They didn't run. They simply did their job, protecting the living, saving the helpless. "Building safe zones." One Siraki elder whispered, watching a human soldier carry 3 injured survivors at once. "These creatures, they are terrifying. But they are terrifying in our favor." Hours passed. Rescue shelters expanded. Thousands of Siraki were gathered into safe areas. Medical ships in orbit received constant streams of engineers stabilized crumbling structures long enough for families to escape. Meanwhile, the battle in the sky raged, but little by little, the humans pushed the marauders back. Their superior technology, better strategy, and unbreakable determination began to dominate the fight. Inside a shelter dome, a young Siraki child tugged on Sarah's armor. "Why? Why are you helping us?" the child asked in a trembling voice. Sarah knelt down, smiling. "Because you asked for help, and humans don't ignore that." The child stared at her, confused. "But you don't even know us." "No," Sarah said softly, "but that doesn't matter." The child hugged her tightly, surprising the human soldier. By the time night fell on the Siraki homeworld, the first major evacuation was complete. Thousands were safe. Dozens of shelters were operating, and the humans were still working, still fighting, still helping. The Siraki watched from their safe zones as human. Warships defended their skies with fire that looked like falling stars for the first time. Hope returned to their hearts, because the Deathworlders had come, and they had come as protectors. The battle began with a soundless flash in the upper sky, but the impact reached all the way down to the burning ground where humans and Siraki struggled to survive. A streak of red light crossed the atmosphere, followed by a loud, thunderous boom that shook the cracked soil under everyone's feet. The marauder fleet had arrived, and they were not wasting a single second. Their cannons were already firing, their formations tightening as they moved toward the Siraki world like predators circling a dying animal. High above the planet, the stars disappeared behind the silhouettes of giant warships. On one side, the dark, jagged shapes of the marauder vessels. On the other side, the shining, powerful forms of the human fleet, arranged in layers of protection around the planet. At the center of the human formation was the flagship, its massive wings glowing with shield energy, its cannons charged and ready. Admiral Kane stood in the middle of the command bridge, her eyes fixed on the tactical hologram displaying both fleets. Blue dots for humans, red dots for marauders, thousands of them, closing in fast. All right, she said, her voice steady. This ends today. For the Siraki, the bridge crew responded with a determined yes, Admiral. The marauders opened fire first. Beams of red energy shot across the void, striking the outer human shield at full strength. The shield flared bright blue, absorbing the attack, though small cracks of electricity flickered across its surface. Shields at 90%, someone reported. Hold the line. Kane commanded. Return fire. A wave of human cannons fired back. Bright blue beams traveled with incredible speed, hitting the first row of marauder ships. Two instantly exploded. A third drifted lifelessly, its hull cracked open like an egg. The Siraki on the surface didn't know the details of the fight in the sky, but they felt the planet tremble as shockwaves passed through the atmosphere. Many clung to each other inside the protective domes set up by the humans. Others watched through small shield windows, terrified but unable to look away. The sky glowed with colors: red flashes, blue streaks, white fire like a storm made of stars. But on the ground, humans didn't stop working. Lieutenant Sarah Holt was inside a rescue dome, treating injured Siraki with her team. When the sky shook again, a frightened Siraki child grabbed her arm. Are the monsters coming? The child whispered. Sarah gently placed her hand on the child's head. No, the monsters are being stopped. Look around us. You're safe because of you. Sarah smiled softly. Because of all of us. The child nodded slowly, comforted. Outside, Sergeant Leon Weller led his squad through a field of burning rubble, searching for survivors. His armor was black with soot, and his lungs ached from the smoke, but he didn't slow down. Every time they found a Siraki trapped under debris or unable to walk, the soldiers carried them to safety. Even when enemy fire lit up the horizon, Leon pushed forward. At one point, he stopped because he heard faint crying, a sound almost buried under the roar of storms. He followed it through a cracked street until he found a small Siraki girl trapped between two fallen walls. I'm here, Leon shouted. Don't move. The girl looked up at him with terrified eyes. The sky is breaking, she said in a tiny voice. Leon smiled despite the danger. Let it break. I'll protect you. He lifted the debris with his exosuit and gently freed her. She held onto his armor tightly, refusing to let go even when they reached the safe dome. Some Siraki were confused, some were overwhelmed, but many were beginning to understand something they had never believed before. Humans were dangerous. Yes, but dangerous in a way that could save instead of destroy. In orbit, the marauders attempted a new strategy. Their ships split into three groups, trying to surround the human fleet. It was an aggressive move designed to pressure Kane into pulling ships away from the planet. But Admiral Kane wasn't fooled. Squadron Beta, intercept the right flank. Squadron Gamma, hold the left. Alpha, stay with me and push the center. Admiral Captain Idris said, studying the enemy movement. They're trying to force a full breakthrough. Kane nodded. And they're going to fail. The battle intensified. Human fighters swarmed like metallic birds, diving and spinning with perfect coordination. Marauder vessels fired wildly, but the humans flew with better discipline, protecting each other and taking precise shots at weak points in enemy hulls. One human pilot, Kelson Raven, led her wing through a tight spiral maneuver that caused three marauder fighters to crash into each other. Her squad cheered and dove again, pushing the advantage. In the flagship, warning lights flashed. Admiral. Enemy cruiser attempting to break through toward the planet. Kane narrowed her eyes. Not a chance. Fire ion cannons. Disable it. The flagship's main cannons lit up and released a massive burst of blue-white energy. It hit the marauder cruiser dead center, shutting down its engines instantly. The ship drifted helplessly, its weapon systems offline. Target neutralized. Someone shouted. Back on the Siraki homeworld, the sky suddenly brightened with a long fiery streak. A marauder fighter had broken through and was falling apart in the atmosphere. Flames spread behind it like a trail of destruction. Humans on the ground reacted instantly. Sarah. Incoming debris, a soldier radioed. Sarah grabbed a group of Siraki and rushed them inside the dome. The shield held strong as burning metal crashed outside. The Siraki huddled together, shaking, but alive. After the shock passed, one Siraki elder approached Sarah, trembling but hopeful. You fight the sky itself, he said softly. You protect even as the heavens fall. We do not understand you. Sarah smiled tiredly. You don't need to understand us. Just stay alive. That's all we want right now. Meanwhile, something changed aboard the Marauder flagship. Their leader, a ruthless commander known across the quadrant for his cruelty, realized the humans were not fleeing. They were not weakening. They were not afraid death. He roared to his crew. Why do they defend these weak creatures? One of his lieutenants whispered, Sir, maybe humans are not like us. The commander snarled. They will be crushed. Prepare the main cannon. His ship aimed directly at the planet. If the weapon fired, millions of Siraki and hundreds of humans on the surface would die instantly. But Admiral Kane saw it. Enemy flagship charging. Idris shouted. They're targeting the planet. Not while I live, Kane said. She opened a channel to all ships. This is Admiral Kane. The Marauder flagship is preparing a planet killer shot. All units protect the Siraki. Follow me. Every human ship responded, without hesitation, without fear, without doubt. They moved in perfect harmony, forming a spearhead formation aimed directly at the Marauder flagship. Engines roared. Shields glowed. Weapons charged. Admiral Kane pointed forward. Fire. The human fleet unleashed everything they had. Cannons, torpedoes, railguns, ion bursts. An entire storm of weapon fire streaked across the void. The Marauder flagship tried to return fire, but the humans were faster, stronger, more united. The first barrage shattered the protective shields. The second ripped through the armor. The third exploded the main cannon before it could fire. A fourth volley hit the engine cord on one huge explosion. The Marauder flagship was destroyed, sending fragments scattering into space like burning stars. The Marauder fleet panicked. Their leader was dead, their flagship gone. They attempted to retreat, but the human ships blocked every escape route. Marauder vessels began surrendering or fleeing randomly into deep space. Within an hour, the entire enemy fleet was routed. The sky calmed down on the Siraki homeworld. The thunder of explosions faded, replaced by the crackling of distant fires and the soft worry of human rescue machines still working. Inside one of the domes, the Siraki elder stepped outside and stared at the sky, tears in his eyes. We lived, he whispered. We lived because they came. A Siraki child tugged on a human soldier's hand. Did you win? The child asked. The soldier smiled gently. We didn't win. We protected. The child tilted their head. Why? The soldier knelt down. Because your life matters. The Siraki looked at the humans with new eyes. Not fear, not confusion. Something else. Hope. All across the surface. Humans checked on the shelters, reorganized supplies, and prepared to evacuate more Siraki to orbit. The worst of the battle was over, but the mission was far from finished. The planet still needed to be saved. The people still needed help, but for the first time in many days, the Siraki could breathe without terror. The sky was no longer filled with death, it was filled with guardians, and the name of those guardians, those strange, wild, powerful beings, would never be forgotten. The battle in the sky had ended, but the real struggle on the Siraki homeworld was only beginning. Smoke still drifted across ruined cities, fires burned in half-collapsed buildings, and the ground trembled with aftershocks from fallen ships. Even though the Marauders had been defeated, their destruction remained behind like a deep wound. And now, humans and Siraki stood together in the middle of that broken world, facing a new challenge: survival. Admiral Kane looked down at the planet from her starship's bridge. The hologram showed entire regions covered in red zones, meaning unsafe. Other areas flickered yellow, meaning unstable. Only small blue dots, places where humans had set up protection domes, were marked as safe. There's a lot of work left, Kane said quietly. Captain Idris nodded beside her. But the Siraki are alive because of us. That's something. It's not enough, she replied. We didn't come here only to save them from Marauders. We came to help them rebuild. She took a deep breath and opened a channel to every human unit on the planet. This is Admiral Kane. The enemy is defeated, but our mission continues. Lives still need saving, cities need stabilizing, and the Siraki need hope. Do your best, and then do more. Her voice echoed through every communicator on the surface. Down on the ground, the humans heard her words and immediately got to work. Sergeant Leon Weller stood in the middle of what used to be a large Siraki marketplace. Now it was a mess of cracked stone, broken archways, and dust that covered everything like gray snow. His squad moved through the wreckage carefully. Using scanners to search for survivors, they found a group of Siraki hiding inside a collapsed storage room. Frightened and unsure if it was safe to come out, Leon approached slowly, lowering his weapon so he didn't appear threatening. You're safe now, he said gently. We'll get you water, food, and a shelter. One Siraki elder stepped forward, shaking. You humans, you fight so fiercely. Why do you help us still? The enemy is gone. Leon shook his head. The enemy is gone, but danger isn't. Buildings can fall, fires can spread, people can get sick or lost. We don't leave until everyone is safe. The Siraki exchanged surprised glances. No one had ever stayed for them before. Others had used them, controlled them, or attacked them, but help without condition was something new. Leon's squad guided the group out of the ruined building, giving the weak Siraki shoulder support. A medical drone flew overhead, scanning them for injuries. Nearby, Lieutenant Sarah Holt and her medical team were working non-stop. The rescue dome was now full of wounded Siraki, many of whom needed urgent care. Sarah moved quickly between beds, checking vitals, giving medicine, stitching wounds, and calming terrified patients. Her clothing was stained with dust and blood, but she didn't stop for even a moment. At one point, a Siraki healer approached her and bowed deeply. "We never had a word for you before," he said. "A being who heals without expecting anything. Now, we think maybe such a word does exist." Sarah smiled kindly. "You don't need a new word. Just call me a friend." The healer blinked, then slowly repeated the word as if tasting something beautiful. "Friend." Outside the dome, more humans were building temporary shelters. Large metal structures unfolded from transport vehicles like giant wings, creating sturdy houses within minutes. Power cells hummed as they activated, bringing light into dark places. Siraki children stared in amazement as humans used tools they had never seen before: plasma cutters, portable shield generators, air recyclers, and water purifiers. Some Siraki slowly walked forward to help, unsure at first. But when a human worker handed them a tool and nodded with a smile, they gathered courage. Soon Siraki and humans stood side by side, lifting beams, clearing rubble, and building new walls. It was the first time many Siraki had worked together with another species. It felt strange, but also warm, like discovering a neighbor you never knew existed. All around the city, scenes like this happened again and again. In one area, human engineers stabilized a cracked dam that was about to burst. In another, soldiers pulled survivors out of underground tunnels. Drones sprayed fire retardant over burning forests. Heavy walkers lifted fallen towers so that teams could search underneath. And everywhere the Siraki looked, humans moved with the same fierce energy they had shown in battle, but now they used that energy to save instead of destroy. On the other side of the planet, a small Siraki girl named Rima sat outside her new shelter, hugging her knees as she watched the sky. She had lost her home, her school, and maybe even her parents. No one knew yet who had survived a human pilot. Raven landed her fighter nearby for maintenance. When she saw the child alone, she walked over and crouched down. "What are you looking at?" Raven asked softly. "The sky," Rima whispered. "I'm waiting for the monsters to come back." Raven shook her head gently. "No monsters today, only us." "But you are scary too," the child said honestly. Raven laughed quietly. "Maybe we look scary, but not to you. You're under our protection now." She took a small glowing bead from her pocket, an earth trinket meant for luck, and they placed it in the girl's hands. "This will help you remember something," Raven said. "When you look at the sky, don't only think about monsters. Think about the ones who fight them too." Rima held the bead, staring at it as if it were magical. Later, when night came, the planet looked peaceful for the first time in many days. Not completely safe, but peaceful. Small fires glowed like orange stars in the distance. Human lights shone from shelters and landing zones. Siraki families huddled together in tents, warming their hands with human-made heaters. A gentle wind moved across the broken streets. Dust settled. Machinery hummed softly. Near midnight, Admiral Kane landed on the surface to inspect progress. As she walked through the reconstructed shelters, the Siraki stared at her with wide eyes. She looked powerful: strong armor, straight posture, sharp eyes, but she also seemed calm, almost gentle. A Siraki elder approached her, leaning on a staff. "You saved us," he said simply. "We saved who we could," she replied. "But there is still much to do." The elder looked around at the humans working tirelessly in the cold night. Some were repairing machines, some carrying bricks, some treating the sick. "You are Deathworlders," he said slowly. "We always believed you were too dangerous to come close to, too fierce, too wild, but now we see that maybe danger can protect." Kane paused for a moment, letting the words sink in. "We are dangerous," she said quietly. "That part is true, but danger doesn't choose sides. We choose, and you chose us," the elder whispered. Kane nodded. The elder suddenly knelt in front of her. Kneeling was a serious gesture in Siraki culture, something only done for one who had saved your entire family or tribe. "From this day," the elder said, voice trembling, "your people will be remembered in our stories. Not as monsters, not as conquerors, but as guardians." Kane looked down at him, surprised and deeply moved. "Stand up," she said gently. "You don't kneel to us. Stand with us. We rebuild together." The elder rose slowly. His eyes were wet. Later, when Kane returned to her command post, she stood on a high cliff overlooking the city. Below her, hundreds of human lights flickered in the darkness, mixed with rising columns of smoke. It was a scene of destruction, but also of hope. Captain Idris approached. "Reconstruction is moving fast," he reported. "The Siraki are beginning to cooperate. They trust us." "Good," Kane said, though her voice sounded tired. "But they don't trust ease. That trust is a responsibility." Idris nodded. "Then we carry it." Kane took a deep breath, looking at the horizon. "Tomorrow, more ships will arrive with supplies, medical units, builders, engineers. We stay until this world stands again." "And after?" Idris asked. She didn't answer immediately. She stared at the sky as if reading something written thereafter. She said at last, "We make sure no one ever threatens them again." Meanwhile, across the planet, more emotional things were happening quietly. Siraki father reunited with his missing daughter thanks to human scouts. An elderly Siraki craftsman taught a human engineer how to repair traditional energy lamps, and the two laughed together like old friends. A human soldier shared food with a hungry Siraki family, splitting his last ration bar without hesitation. And somewhere in a quiet corner, the child Rima showed her glowing bead to other children, telling them the story of the skyfighters who came when everyone else had abandoned them. Rumors spread among the Siraki whispers that the humans weren't just brave, they were unstoppable, that the humans had risked everything for people they barely knew, that the Deathworlders had fought like storms but healed like sunlight. The Siraki began to look at their destroyed world with new eyes that no longer saw only despair. They saw something new rising from the ashes. A future near dawn. Long before the sun rose, the planet fell into a quiet stillness. The air felt cold and heavy, but peaceful. The stars above twinkled softly, glowing through the thin clouds. Humans lay down to rest beside Siraki families. Soldiers slept sitting up. Medics dozed next to supply crates. Pilots leaned against their ships, wrapped in warm blankets. For the first time in a long time, the Siraki slept without trembling. It did not matter that their cities were broken, that it did not matter that their sky still smelled like smoke. They felt safe, they felt protected, and for the first time in generations, they felt something they had forgotten how to feel. Hope. All because the Deathworlders had come wild, dangerous, and full of heart. The sun rose slowly over the Siraki homeworld, painting the broken landscape with soft light. The fires had finally died out during the night, leaving behind black marks across the ground like scars, yet when the first warm rays touched the damaged buildings, the world looked less frightening than before. The shadows faded. The sky became clear. Birds, small alien birds with bright wings, flew above the ruins for the first time in days. It was as if nature itself sensed that danger had passed. In the early morning silence, humans and Siraki began to wake. Some stretched their arms. Others checked wounds or sat quietly, breathing the cool air. Children yawned and rubbed their eyes. Soldiers wiped dust from their armor. Workers prepared tools. Medics checked their supply cases. Everyone knew it would be another long day. But something in the air felt different, lighter, calmer, almost hopeful. Admiral Kane stood on a cliff again, watching the sunrise. She looked tired but peaceful. For the first time in many days, she allowed herself a small smile. Captain Idris approached without speaking at first. He simply stood beside her, letting the silence settle. "Beautiful morning," Idris finally said. Kane nodded. "Yes, the first real morning they've had in a long time." "Rebuilding teams are already starting," Idris informed her. Siraki volunteers showed up at every worksite. Kane turned to him with a hint of surprise. "All of them, almost," Idris said. "Some are still afraid, but most want to help." Kane smiled softly. "Good, this is their world. We're just guests." Down below, the rebuilding efforts began again. Humans drove heavy machines through the streets, lifting broken stones and clearing paths. Siraki workers carried wooden beams, energy rods, and tools made from local materials. They copied the humans' movements, learning quickly. At one site, a Siraki builder showed a human engineer how to use a special mineral to reinforce walls. The mineral glowed softly and strengthened the structures, making them resistant to future attacks. The engineer was impressed and laughed. "Looks like you teach us now," he said. The builder smiled proudly in another area. Sergeant Leon Weller and his squad worked with Siraki guards to secure a damaged tower. They climbed together using ropes and magnetic grips, fixing weak points in the structure. For the first time, Siraki guards trusted humans enough to climb beside them, sharing equipment and instructions. At a medical station, Lieutenant Sarah Holt trained Siraki healers on how to use human scanning tools. The Siraki healers had gentle hands and deep knowledge of herbal medicine, while Sarah had advanced technology and medical training. Together, they formed a perfect team. A Siraki healer laughed as he used a portable scanner for the first time. "It tells me everything," he said. "It is like reading a whole person at once." Sarah chuckled. "Just don't drop it. It's expensive." The healer blinked. "Expensive?" Sarah sighed dramatically. "Very expensive." They both laughed. Nearby, children from both species played together. Human kids taught Siraki kids how to throw a ball. Siraki kids taught human kids how to climb tall stone walls using their flexible limbs. Their laughter echoed across the ruins, bringing life back into the silent city. For the first time since the attack, joy filled the air. But even in this growing peace, the memory of the Marauder invasion hung like a shadow. Many Siraki wondered if the Marauders would return one day. Some worried that other hostile species might follow. And humans wondered too what would happen if they left. Would the Siraki be safe? Admiral Kane met with the Siraki Council inside a temporary building made from metal plates and glowing lanterns. The council members sat in a circle with her at the center. Their faces were tired, but calmer than before. They no longer trembled when humans entered the room. One of the council members, an elderly Siraki with deep blue markings on his skin, spoke first. "Admiral Kane," he said, bowing his head, "our people owe you everything. If you had not come, we would not be alive." Kane nodded. "You would have done the same for us if the situation were reversed." The council members exchanged awkward looks, and one of them said honestly, We do not know if that is true. Kane leaned forward. Then learn it now, because today is the day things change. The council listened carefully. You are not alone anymore, Kane continued. You have allies. You have friends. And as long as your people stand for peace, humanity will stand with you. The council members murmured softly, their eyes brightening with emotion. Another council member asked, will you stay to help us rebuild? For as long as needed, Kane said. Our ships will rotate crews, supplies will continue to arrive, and engineers will begin long-term projects to restore your cities. The council members bowed deeply, honoring her. When the meeting ended, Kane stepped outside and saw dozens of Siraki gathered in silence, waiting. When they saw her, they lowered their heads respectfully. Some placed their hands on their hearts. Others held up small charms or glowing stones made to honor heroes. Kane felt a lump in her throat. She nodded to them, humbled. Later that day, a message arrived from Earth Command. Kane opened the holographic communication privately. The message read, Mission Update, Diplomatic Channels request Siraki partnership. Offer them protectorate status if they wish. Kane read the message twice. A protectorate meant the Siraki would be under human protection. It also meant shared technology, shared travel routes, shared defense. It was a major step. She went to speak with the Siraki Council again. When she explained the offer, the council members were stunned. You mean, one asked slowly, you want us as partners? Yes, Kane said. Not subjects, not servants, partners. A long silence filled the room. Then the elder spoke with tears in his eyes. For generations we lived afraid of every shadow in the sky. Always hiding, always waiting for someone stronger to hurt us. But today, someone stronger saved us, and now you stretch your hand toward us again. He stood and placed his hands on Kane's shoulders, a gesture of deep trust in Siraki culture. We accept, he said. We stand with humanity. When the news spread across the planet, Siraki cheered, cried, and hugged each other. Humans celebrated too, shaking hands with Siraki workers and clapping them on the back. Something extraordinary had happened that day. Two very different species had chosen to walk into the future together. In the following weeks, the rebuilding accelerated. Human starships filled the orbit with supplies. Siraki engineers learned new construction methods. Humans learned Siraki farming techniques that restored the soil. New homes rose from the rubble. Schools reopened. Roads were repaired. Forests were replanted. One morning, while the sun was rising again, Sergeant Leon Weller walked through a newly rebuilt district. Siraki families waved at him. Children ran beside him. A little boy tugged on his sleeve. Are you leaving soon? The boy asked sadly. Leon ruffled the boy's hair. Not yet. And even when we leave, we'll come back whenever you call. Really? Promise. The boy grinned and ran back to his friends. Meanwhile, Lieutenant Sarah Holt finished teaching a group of Siraki healers how to run a human-style clinic. They thanked her with gifts, small wooden carvings of animals from their forests. These are beautiful, Sarah said, touched. They represent protection, one healer explained. As you protected us, we give you these symbols to remind you of your courage. Sarah hugged them tightly. Not far away, Pilot Raven stood on a repaired landing pad, looking at her fighter. The Siraki children she had befriended ran up to her, laughing and shouting her name. One child held up the glowing bead she had given Rima earlier. We made more, he said excitedly. We want to give them to your soldiers too, so they remember us. Raven felt her chest warm. They will love them, she said, and she meant it. As days passed, the Siraki world began to look alive again. The ground was still scarred, but new structures rose like flowers from ashes. The air smelled cleaner. The sky looked brighter. People walked taller. Voices sounded confident. It was no longer a broken world. It was a recovering world, a healing world. One evening, as the humans prepared to send their first report back to Earth, Admiral Kane gathered her main officers on a hill overlooking the rebuilt city center. Lights glowed from windows. Children laughed in the distance. Siraki musicians played soft music. Humans sat together eating dinner with Siraki families. Kane looked at her team. We came because we heard a cry for help, she said quietly. We didn't know what we would find, but we found people worth fighting for, people worth protecting. Her voice softened. And now, we have found friends. Idris nodded. And allies, Leon said. And a reason to keep going. Sarah smiled. And hope. Kane let out a slow breath. This world will rise again, and when it does, it will remember that humanity stood with it. She raised her hand. To the Siraki, she said. The others raised their hands too. To the Siraki, they repeated. In the city below, fireworks, Siraki-style fireworks made from glowing minerals burst into the sky, painting the night in bright colors. Humans watched with wide eyes, amazed by the beauty. The Siraki cheered wildly. For the first time in history, two very different worlds celebrated together under the same sky. And somewhere deep in the rebuilt city, Rima held the glowing bead close to her heart and whispered to her friends, when the sky was darkest, they came for us. The stars twinkled gently above them, as if agreeing. The Siraki homeworld had been broken, but now it was rising again, and it would never forget the Deathworlders who answered their SOS and changed everything forever.